Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Now let us take pure substances for further study. Now pure substances can be divided into two groups. We have elements and compounds. So these are both pure kind substances. Now what are elements? Elements are those which are made up of only one kind of particles. Okay, whereas compounds are those which are made up of two or more different kind of particles and have chemical bond between them, okay, such that they tend to form a new substance. Now for example, in case of elements, we can have hydrogen. Hydrogen is composed of two hydrogen atoms. So you would see that there are only one kind of particles. Again, if I take oxygen, then it is made up of two oxygen atoms, which is again made up of one kind of particles. But in case of compound, it is made up of two kind of particles. One particle is carbon, the other is oxygen. But you need to understand that when these carbon and oxygen combine together, they form carbon dioxide, which is a new substance. And this new substance will behave like a pure substance. Why will they behave like a pure substance? Because even after breaking them, if you look around and look for the composition, they will always be CO2. For instance, you take a cylinder and there are carbon dioxide particles in it. Now, if you analyze every part of it, each part of it will consist of carbon dioxide, which is a pure substance. So, though two elements or more elements come together, but they form a compound which is also a pure substance, and it loses the entire property, physical or chemical property of the elements and becomes a new substance, that is compound, which has new physical and chemical properties. Alright, so you would find that there are 118 different kinds of elements. So out of this 118 elements, 92 elements are naturally occurring elements and the rest of them are man-made. So only 92 elements are naturally occurring. So we have 92 elements which are naturally occurring elements. Most of the elements are solid in nature, whereas we do have them in the form of liquid as well as in the form of gases. Now, when it comes to solid or liquid or gases, the elements are classified into three zones. They are metals, non-metals and metalloids. What are metals? Metals are those which are hard, which make sound. They are very good conductors of heat and electricity. They are malleable. Malleable means they can be beaten into thin sheets, and they are also ductile, that is, they can be stretched into a thin wire. And most of the metals are solid, except we have mercury, which is liquid, and also gallium, which turns liquid at the room temperature. Whereas when it comes to non-metals, we have most of the non-metals in the gaseous form. Whereas bromine is one non-metal which is in the liquid form. And definitely I need to mention that carbon exists in the solid form. Next, we have metalloids, which have both the characteristic of metals and non-metals. So if we try to make a distinction between metals and non-metals, then we need to select certain parameters on the basis of which these differences can be made. The very first thing about the physical state, that most of the metals are solid, whereas in case of non-metals, most of the non-metals are in the gaseous form. Metals are sonorous, they make sound. Non-metals do not make sound. Metals are malleable, whereas non-metals are non-malleable. Metals are ductile, whereas non-metals are non-ductile. Metals are very good conductors of heat and electricity. Non-metals are bad conductors of heat and electricity, except we have carbon. You would see that graphite is a good conductor of electricity. So it is the only non-metal which conducts electricity. Metals have high boiling and high melting point because the bond between the atoms are very strong, whereas in case of non-metals, their boiling point and melting point are low. That is the reason they are normally gaseous in nature at room temperature. So I hope with this you have understood the characteristics of pure substances. That pure substances are made up of only one kind of particles. It can be a particle of an element that is made up of only one kind of atom, or it can be a particle of compound which are made up of two or more different kinds of atoms. Alright, I hope with this the concept of pure substances is clear as well. Now we had already learned what is a mixture, what are the different types of mixtures, and what are the different properties that each of these mixtures have. We also learned about compounds. Now let us make a demarcation, let us differentiate mixtures and compounds. So we are writing the differences between what are the differences between mixture and compound. So let us point out what are the differences between mixtures and compounds. Okay. Now in case of mixture, we find the first difference is that mixture, whenever two or more different kind of substances, whether it is an element or compounds, they mix together, then it is whatever change that happens, it is a physical change. Okay. So mixture is composed of two or more substances that do not combine chemically. Okay. So basically they are physical change, they show physical change. Whereas in case of compounds, what happens? The components, now when I am saying components, these means atoms, okay, atoms combine chemically to form compounds, and thus they show chemical change. That means they completely lose out their own characteristic and take up a new property and new characteristic. The second point of difference is that they are of variable composition. They are of variable composition. It just depends upon you, the ratio or the percentage that you want to have between them. They are variable. But in case of compound, the composition is fixed. Okay, the composition is fixed. The ratio between the components are always fixed. The third one is that the mixtures shows the properties of the components. okay, shows the properties of the component. But here the properties of the component is not shown, rather a new property gets surfaced. Surfaced means gets shown. Alright. The next property for mixtures, what can you think? That in case of mixtures, you can separate them easily, right? By the process of filtration, evaporation, sieving, hand picking. There are so many different kinds of physical processes by which the mixtures can be separated. So separation of mixtures can happen through physical methods. Through physical methods, that is possible. So when I'm saying physical methods, it can be evaporation, it can be filtration, it can also be maybe sieving, etc. There can be many different kinds of methods that can be taken up in order to separate them. Whereas in case of compounds, no physical method of separation possible. Okay, they cannot be separated through physical methods. Maybe some chemical methods can be utilized, but physical methods definitely not. So these are the differences between the mixture and compound. So this will give you at a glance the different properties of mixture and compound.